Chapter 7, The Little Ghost Girl, Again. Kino Amark. I wanted to ask Mother why she tried to run away from the Emperor, but how could I, after she already told me that it had something to do with the nightmares? I did not want to press her further. As the royal scribe, my mother usually locked herself inside her room and wrote, and when she did, she became absorbed in the length of the scroll. What could she have been writing? What could she have written that needed to be submitted to the Emperor for review? Could it be a novel? Or Akea's history? This had gone on for many moon turns, as far back as I could remember. Sometimes, I felt like the scrolls had something to do with her nightmares. It was a school day today. I walked into our classroom, straight to my seat. Mayo was already inside, reading something from one of the assigned books. He looked up as I approached him. "Have you thought of a new adventure yet?" he asked hopefully. Mayo was a fat kid who liked to seek adventures with me, but lately, we have not had any exciting new ones. I shook my head as I stared into his big, round eyes. "Nothing is interesting," I paused. "Maybe Mayo and I could find a place decent enough to live in, far away from Wawang, and do more adventures together." "But wait, we need to find a hiding place," I said, taking back my words. Mayo's round eyes grew wider. "A hiding place? Shh, keep your voice down. I don't want anyone to hear about this adventure," I shushed since I noticed that a few of our other classmates had started entering the classroom. "Do we have boundary limitations?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, we can go anywhere," I said. "My mother will be coming with us," I said. "What?" he exclaimed, and several of our classmates could not help but look at us. I kicked him from under the table. "Ouch. I told you to keep your voice down," I whispered. "But if your mom is going with us, it's not going to be any fun at all," he complained. I grimaced. It was not going to be any fun at all. Mayo took out his sandwich and laid it on his desk. He touched the sandwich and concentrated before he bit into it. His power was eccentric. Well, at least from what he told me. He said that he could make harmful components of food go away. Like now, for instance, I was pretty sure that he removed something from the sandwich before eating it, which was why it was no surprise to me that Mayo was fat. "I'll get a map from the library later and check out which places we could go to. I bet that'll be a good way to start our adventure." "Yes, brilliant," I agreed. The bell rang, and all the other students who were still outside streamed in and took their seats. Conrad, Eros and Lima Gotti entered last, snickering. There must be something funny outside, or they could be talking about a prank they were planning to pull on any of us. Out of our group, Conrad and Lima were a few of the stronger ones. Lima could make the land rumble while Conrad could run fast like the wind. At the coming Akeen Wine Festival, we were expected to be presented to the palace all ready to register our powers in the Akeen books. Mayo nudged me in the ribs. "You're coming with me, right?" he said as he chewed on his sandwich. "I told you I'm not going to the Canellan Palace to be humiliated," I said, trying my best so no one else would hear. "But, what about my power?" he said before pointing to Conrad and Lima. "They're going to laugh at me and tease me about it, and I'll have no one to defend me," he complained. "At least you have a power," I snapped at him and then felt guilty about it. Mayo did not mean to make me feel bad about my power. But not having any ability burns at me, and to be in the palace where everyone from school would see me humiliated, I will not be able to handle that. "Please," Mayo begged. I covered my ears to shut him out. Dante Leben, our teacher, entered the room, and everyone instantly became silent. I had to endure another hour of his lecture on how to control our powers even though I had none. This was the worst class ever, and every time, I counted the minutes before the class was over. Today was different, though. Professor Levin led us out to the school grounds and instructed us to fall in line. There were two groups, and since I was one of the taller children, I had to be at the end of the line. Mayo was in the front, and he was paired with Lima, who was almost the same size as Mayo except for his girth. Buddies. In harnessing your powers, It's important that you share the exercise with your buddies, Professor Levin began. I looked at my side and saw who I was paired with. Nong Dinta. He was as tall as I was, and we almost had the same body size. If I had power, it would have been a suitable pairing. The difficult part is that you each have different powers, but it all boils down to control. If you can control your power, it doesn't matter how inferior you are. Pardon me for referring to a power as inferior. I know we don't like to hear our powers measured up. Anyway, what I mean to say is, if your power is weaker than your partner, the professor paused and grimaced as he said weaker before continuing, your power's potency would matter less if you don't know how to control it, because control is what's separate mediocrity from mastery. Control is what's important. I did not listen to the lecture because I had no need for it. How would I control something I did not have? I could only count on tactics and useful strategies. If I could have a sharp mind, maybe that in itself was a power as good as anyone could ever hope to have, just like what Mother kept on reminding me. My power is in my legs, Professor Levin said. He kicked off his shoes, and we watched as his right toes clumped dust, threw it in midair, and started kicking. The soil landed on Mayo's maroon sweatshirt, forming a letter. We laughed and clapped at the same time. Now, who among you believes he has the strongest power in this group? Professor Levin asked. Not surprisingly, it was Lima who raised his hand. Come here, boy. Let's see what you've got, Professor Levin said. Sometimes it did not feel like he was our teacher at all. Maybe because he was relatively young compared to our other professors, and he bantered with us a lot outside the classroom. I caught sight of Nicola batting her eyelashes at the professor. Many girls claimed that he was handsome, given his golden curls and green eyes. I scrunched my nose. Lima took on a crouching stance and looked at Professor Levin. He squinted as he opened his upturned palms. The pebbles on the ground started to shake. Before he could do anything more, Professor Levin jumped, his toes scooping up dust, kicking them in the air until some of the pebbles started shooting straight at Lima's clothes. It was so fast that Lima did not even get the chance to avoid the flying dust and pebbles. As the final clump shot his way, it blew in his face, and he ended up coughing. Professor Levin was back on his feet, and we were all silent. Mayo glanced my way and gave me his widest grin. I was pretty sure what he was thinking. That served Lima right. That was for all the bullying that he ever did to us. Lima was still coughing as he went back beside his buddy. His face was sour, and his eyes were red from the dust. Class, that's what control means. It doesn't matter what your power is. All you have to do is to make the most of it. Harness your power. Suddenly, the ground rumbled under him, and he almost slipped. He kicked in the air and shot a pebble directly at Lima's shoulder. And that's for cheating, Professor Levin said. You don't use your power to harm anyone. 3 things that you will learn as your power grows stronger. 1. You don't use power to do bad things. 2. As a citizen, you use it to protect and serve the land. 3. We are all equals. Our power doesn't make us more special than others. When we are ordained citizens, power becomes shared across the land. We are expected to use them for the common good. The way we use power binds us together. It defines who we really are. Lima blushed. Several of my classmates nodded, but I saw some of them yawning, too. The class was getting boring. The moves that Professor Levin displayed earlier were what each of the students preferred rather than the lengthy professorial lectures. Where does control come from? Asked Professor Levin. The mind, Conrad answered hesitantly. Professor Levin nodded as he moved around. Yes. That's true. Where else? A skinny girl answered, from the heart. Her voice was in doubt, but then Professor Levin looked at her and shouted excitedly, yes. The skinny girl blushed, and she looked down at her feet. Exactly. What one never understands is how powerful the heart can be. It is our most errant desires that give us what we need to make our power stronger. Feel the emotions rushing in as you try to harness your power, and it will come out. It is difficult to put this in words, but the more you get in touch with your heart, the more positively it will affect your power, he lectured. Having said that, please face your buddies. Get to know each other and share your power with them. It's only a couple more weeks before you are all called in to be presented in the palace. I hope that all of you will be ready by then, he said, sitting down to watch us. We did as we were told. I was not as excited about this task because I had nothing to share. Chances were, I would have to listen to Nong rumble on and on about his power. But surprisingly, he only told me that he was an excellent swimmer, and he could control water when he was on it, but did not say anything more. No bragging even. Talk about luck. At least I did not have to be bombarded by stories of how magnificent his power was. Now the time had come for me to share what I could do. I opened my mouth but thought of nothing to say. In front of me, some footprints appeared, and the hair on my arm stood. It was creepy, but it gave me the lie I needed. I can see ghosts, I said. Nong's mouth hung open. Really? The footsteps stopped beside Nong, and the direction of the steps told me that it was facing me. I shook my head. No, I'm kidding, I said, faking a grin. There's no power yet, I said, and waited for the taunting that I knew would come. Instead, Nong said, "Oh. Well, I'm sure you will discover what your power is soon." The footsteps started walking away, and I stared at them. They moved quicker, farther away from me as though they were running. "Excuse me. I need to pee," I said before breaking into a run to catch the footsteps. They were so light I thought I might be the only one who saw them. If it were not for the encounter that I had with Piper weeks ago at the foot of Mount Recus, I would not have even noticed it myself. "Hey, come back!" Professor Levin yelled. "He's going to pee," Nong said. The class laughed, but I was already too far away to care who laughed and did not. And besides, I had grown accustomed to their laughter anyway. The footsteps were moving farther away, and I had to run faster than I usually did to catch up with them. The hairs on my arms were standing on end, but there was something odd about these ghosts. Were they supposed to have footsteps? The last time I encountered the ghost Piper, I remember touching her body, and it was solid. It was not made of air, nor was it even cold. Was it possible that the ghost was actually not a ghost? I had to find out. The footsteps were difficult to track by now because they had started running inside the forest towards Mount Recus. And then it hit me, oh, it was true. The ghost was from the ghost town. At least that was how it seemed. The footsteps ran towards the mountains to get inside of the ghost town. "Wait!" I shouted. I did not know why I did that. But the ghost talked to me last time and at least gave me its name. If it were the same ghost, which I assumed it was, then it was a girl whose name was Piper. "Piper?" I shouted, hoping that it was her and that she would show herself. Was I ready to see a ghost? Her footsteps were gone by now. I heard the soft crunching of the dried leaves around me as if someone was stepping on them. I looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. She was quick, though, either that or she really was a ghost and that I would never be able to catch her ever. I heard the rustling rushing in front of me, and I followed, running with all my might. Then the movements stopped, and so did the sounds. I sat down on the ground, panting. "I won't leave," I said, hoping that the ghost heard me. I waited, but there was no other sound aside from the loud thumping of my heart. I was pretty tired, not knowing how far I had run. By the next day, I was sure to receive a note from the teacher about skipping class altogether. But the footsteps of this ghost had been following me around, and I needed to face my fears. Isn't that what people say? This is me being courageous. If I'm not that, then how in the world would I ever be able to help my mother? This newfound courage did not stop my hands from getting clammy, though. I heard movements from behind me, and I stood up slowly, not breathing. A dog ran straight towards me and lifted its paws at me, licking my hands. "Brew, go away," I said. If Brew was here, then I could only guess who was coming next. "You ran away without me?" Mayo asked, revealing himself from the shrubbery, panting. When he reached me, he crouched down to catch his breath. It's a good thing Brew could track your scent, he said. Mayo should get some exercise. He has to be in shape if I were to take him in my search for a hiding place for my mother and me. Why did you follow me? What? That's not the question. The question is, why did you leave me? Mayo countered. I'm not going out for an adventure, I said, which was true. It was not an adventure I was seeking, although, come to think of it, it sort of was. I scanned the surroundings, hoping that the ghost would show any signs of its presence. Then why did you run away like that? Professor Levin will be mad at you for skipping the rest of the class. He told the class that even if you didn't have any power, that didn't excuse you from not attending it. You know, he said, what's important is control, we said in unison, and we broke down laughing. I patted Brew on the head and sat beside the dog. Mayo looked around before doing the same. So, what are you doing here? This is very near. Mayo's round eyes bulged from their sockets as he recognized the place. The ghost town. He stood up so quickly that Brew sensed his anxiety and was immediately by his side. Come on, Brew, let's leave Kino here. This is certainly no place for adventure. I shrugged and ignored Mayo. I did not want him here, anyway. If he was here, there was no chance that the ghost would ever show herself. Mayo started walking away while Brew stayed, his ears pricked up. Then Brew began to growl. Mayo and I looked in the direction Brew was barking at, and we waited for whoever or whatever it was to show up. Mayo ran towards me and clutched my hands but then used me as a human shield, shoving me right in front of him. His hands gripped my arms tightly. Let go, I spat out. Then the ground rumbled beneath us, and we both toppled down. Brew stopped barking and let out a squeal. Before we were back on our feet, Lima and Conrad showed up. Brew started barking again, but when the land rumbled under his feet once more, it stopped barking and ran away. What are you losers doing here? Lima asked. Conrad looked around curiously, his eyebrows furrowed. Nothing, I said. Practicing, Mayo said before I had the chance to stop him. Lima's eyebrow shot up, and his reaction was mirrored in Conrad's face. Lima asked, What are you practicing? Eating? The bullies laughed. Mayo blushed furiously, and his cheeks turned pink. No. Kino discovered his power. That stopped both of them. Conrad moved closer. He ran in circles around us and then stopped by Lima's side. You're lying. What have you been practicing? Conrad asked. Everybody was looking at me. I caught Mayo's eyes, and I fought the urge to kick him. Why did he say I have discovered my power? What? Lima asked as he eyed me from head to toe as though he was measuring the strength of whatever power I accidentally discovered. Mayo said hesitantly, it's Distantecus. Shut up, I told him. Oh, you shut up, Mayo said back to me. My jaw dropped. What in the world was Mayo's problem? Conrad's and Lima's eyes widened in surprise before the two of them broke down laughing again. This is going to be good, Conrad said. They sat in front of us. Show us your Distantecus, he said. I squinted my eyes at Mayo and wanted to ask him why he had to open his big mouth. Even more importantly, why Distantecus? It was an ancient power, a much revered one, that only a few Akeans ever possessed. It was the power to move things and levitate objects using only the mind. I used to dream about what my power could be like, and Distantecus, in its grandiosity, never even crossed my mind. I'm sorry, he whispered to me. I thought that if I told them something really, really strong, they would get scared and run away. What a horrible reason. Before it got any worse, I said, I have no power. I can't magically move things using my mind. Mayo's just fooling around. Then I nudged a scared Mayo, and he nodded several times. It's true, he said. We're sorry. Crat. You losers are just wasting our time. Let's go, Lima, but before we go, let's have some fun first. But Conrad stopped as Mayo pointed at a floating rock, which was about the size of my fist. Look. Kino, are you the one doing that? I looked at the floating rock and began shaking my head. Was I doing that? I raised my arm, and the rock floated higher. I lowered my arm, and the rock fell down. Lima and Conrad were both looking at the rock, their mouths now hanging open. I swore if a bee were to fly by, it would have been impossible for that bee not to end up in any one of their mouths. How in the world? I concentrated and mustered all the energy that I had and looked at another rock, willing it to move. But instead of the round, smooth stone that I summoned to move, another rock floated instead, and I got even more confused. If I were the one doing it, then why was I making the wrong rock move? I lifted my arm, and the rock floated higher. Lima's and Conrad's eyes were glued to me now with a kind of amused reaction, and I wished I could read what they were thinking. I made a throwing gesture, and the rock flew and landed in front of Conrad and Lima, who were both standing at attention now. Mayo's eyes were excited, and a bit of drool ran down the corner of his mouth. "Close your mouth, Mayo," I said. "Oh," he said before closing his mouth. "He's still learning, but when he gets to master his power, he will throw bigger rocks at you," he shouted, wiping away the sliver of spittle at the corner of his mouth. Lima and Conrad looked at each other before they started walking away. "This is nonsense," Conrad said in a hushed tone that sounded so peculiar coming from him. When they were already far from us, Mayo taunted them further, saying, "Boulders. Kino will haul boulders at you." "Stop it, Mayo," I said. Mayo looked at me as though he was seeing me for the first time. "Wow. I was only making that up, Distantecus. I didn't know you really have power." I did not know how to react. I was sure I did not have any abilities, but how would I explain what just happened? I moved closer to the rock and lifted my hand without touching it. The rock floated. Mayo was at my side, his mouth hanging open in astonishment. Then I moved closer to the rock and made a gesture of dropping the rock. The stone fell. How was I doing this? I walked closer and closer to the rock until it was within my reach and raised my hands again. This time, when the rock floated, I saw what was underneath it, soft dents of footsteps on the ground. And then I realized, the ghost was playing me. I saw my chance, and while I was still holding my hand up, I jumped forward, hoping to grasp a body out of thin air. I was not expecting a body, but when I slammed against a solid, invisible object, I immediately tightened my hold, and whatever it was, whoever it was wrestled to the ground. "Show yourself," I said. "I'm not going to hurt you," I shouted. I could not see Mayo because I was busily wrestling with the ghost, holding its body against mine. It seemed that the ghost was so tiny that I could only surmise it was Piper. I had my arms around it, and any minute now, it would show itself. I could not wait for that, though. I was so excited to finally find out the truth about the ghost that I was smiling even as I wrestled with it before something strong hit me on the head that it was enough to make me pass out.